Welcome to our show. Today we have Patsy Widakuswara, Voice of America's White House Bureau Chief. How are you, Patsy?
I'm fine, thank you, Ahsan, and Happy New Year to you and your audience.
Happy New Year. We just saw the first anniversary of 6th January, and I think most people know what happened on 6th January 2021. The Capitol was under siege by hundreds of rioters, and President Biden gave a speech on the anniversary, 6th of January.
Those who stormed this Capitol, and those who instigated and incited, and those who called on them to do so, held a dagger at the throat of America, at American democracy. They didn't come here out of patriotism or principle. They came here in rage, not in service of America, but rather in service of one man.
He put the blame squarely on the then President Donald Trump for that attack on the Capitol. And it was not only the attack on the Capitol, it was very symbolic. What struck you in President Biden's speech?
Well, just to remind your viewers again, Ahsan, who may not remember what happened on January 6, 2021, this was the time when American lawmakers in Congress were certifying the results of the 2020 November election that placed Joe Biden as the winner. But of course, we remember at that time, President Donald Trump rallied his supporters, saying that the election was stolen from him and encouraged them to march from the White House at that time to the Congress where this certification was happening. And then as a result, we see this massive breach of the Capitol. We saw a siege, we saw riots that actually took several lives. So on the anniversary of January 6th, what President Joe Biden did was quite remarkable. For a whole year, he never engaged directly with former President Trump, never really said much about what happened in terms of blaming President Trump, because the goal for President Biden was to unite Americans from this trauma, from this very hurtful and very violent page in their history. But on the anniversary, President Joe Biden had absolutely no qualms in laying the blame squarely on President Trump. Biden blamed Trump not only for what happened on January 6th, he described it very clearly as when the violence was happening, President Trump did nothing for hours except just watched it on television, never asked his supporters to back down until much, much later. And he also blamed former President Trump, as well as Republicans who kept on pushing this baseless claim, the narrative, what Democrats call the big lie, which is the baseless claim that the 2020 election was stolen and Joe Biden did not win the White House in a fair and square way. So that was what was most striking to me about the speech that Biden made, was that how forceful he was in just laying out the blame on President Trump, laying out the blame on Republicans who continue to push the false narrative about the election, as well as his very forceful defense of American democracy, saying that, yes, American democracy has taken a hit, but we can rebuild from this trauma.
The interesting thing about his speech was, there is a general impression in many people's mind that the Westerners don't care much about religion or God. But in this speech by President Biden, we see some references from the biblical references. I mean, he talks about God's truth. He talks about standing in the breach. What do you think?
I think it's not just in this speech, Ahsan. I think in every speech, President Joe Biden always ends it with, may God bless you and may God bless our troops and may God bless the United States of America. So something that your viewers may not be aware of is that President Joe Biden is a very devout Catholic. And, as a reporter covering him at the White House, and even before then, during the campaign last year, every time we go to a new city, President Joe Biden almost always finds time to go to the church, to attend mass, or to have the priest come to him. So President Joe Biden, no doubt, is a very, very religious man, and religion really influences the way he approaches policy and the way he thinks, except on some issues, for example, such as abortion, where he is on the liberal end of the spectrum. And yes, specifically on the speech that he made yesterday, he did make those references, those biblical references. This is God's truth. I am standing in the breach, meaning I am here to protect American democracy. But as you pointed out, this is something very common that's commonly done by American politicians, because Americans, by and large, compared to Europeans, are a much, much more religious society. You can count it in terms of, how many people attend church regularly, how many people say they believe in God when they're surveyed, and so on. So, if you want to think about whether Westerners are religious or not, I mean, I think you can probably differentiate between Europeans and Americans. Americans are much more religious compared to Europeans.
When we were covering 2016 election, we saw how polarized media became, people became in this country. And now in 2020, we saw even worse. I mean, in 2016, when Hillary lost to Trump, there was a lot of debate, but I mean, many people actually thought Hillary was going to win, but she didn't. And then the peaceful transfer of power happened. But in 2020, we saw what happened, the peaceful transfer of power, which is an example for the rest of the world. I mean, as far as democracy is concerned. So 1 year on, what is the state of democracy, US democracy?
You're absolutely right that the peaceful transfer of power is essentially the heart of any democracy, right? I mean, to have a functioning democracy, you have to be able to lay on the assumption that once a government no longer has the support of the people, it will gladly pass on the baton of power to the next government who does have the vote from the people. We did not see that happening in 2021 when Donald Trump lost in the 2020 election to Joe Biden. And so, to answer your question, what is the state of American democracy now, a year after the failure of having this peaceful transfer of power? We can look at a couple of things. The first one is that if we look at polls, the majority of Republicans still consider that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. They believe the lies that President Trump continues to spread to day, that the election was stolen. And Republican lawmakers continue to push that narrative as well. Republican lawmakers continue to go on state levels, especially states that are occupied or that are where Republicans are in power, to pass out legislations, to try to pass legislation that really controls the election system that Democrats say lock them out of the political process. So the division is still there, the polarization is still there, and the lack of trust in American institutions of democracy still exists very much a year after what happened on January 6th.
Right, and I was reading your article on this issue, and many experts you have spoken with, they have expressed their concern about this ongoing polarized situation in this country, and some of their predictions are quite bleak. But what do you think of the global standing of America's democracy?
So I think the experts that I've spoken to have no doubt that what happened on January 6, 2021 has a global impact. It has an impact in several ways. The first one is that it shows autocratic governments, for example, like Russia and China and Iran and other American adversaries, they can say, look at that. Look how messy. Look how horrible. Look how failing American democracy is. How can they lecture us on the issue of democracy or human rights now when their own house is in disarray? It also becomes an excuse for those leaders to defend their own undemocratic systems, and they can say that our way, our autocratic way, is better than democracy because democracy is messy, democracy doesn't get anything done. And this is exactly the point that President Biden actually addressed in his speech on January 6th. He said that autocrats, American enemies, are betting on the fact that American democracy will fail. They say that American democracy is too bogged down by divisions and polarizations to get anything done. And he says that it is the challenge for governments everywhere, democratic governments everywhere, to show that democracy is still the best system of government.
So, what is next on the fight for democracy for America?
So the big issue right now is on the issue of voting rights. President Joe Biden delivered remarks in Atlanta, Georgia on Tuesday, basically focusing or pushing this push by Democrats to pass federal legislations that can guarantee that all Americans can vote, can have access to the ballot box. This may be interesting to your viewers, is that election day, unlike in many countries, in Bangladesh, for example, election day is usually one day and it's like the same everywhere in the country, right? In the US, because of the federal system, it's not like one election. Imagine, think of it as 50 different elections happening at the same time, because everything is decided on the state level because it's a federal system. So, who can vote, when they can vote, how they can vote differs based on whatever state you happen to be in. And if your state is controlled by Republicans, what they want to do is they want to limit access to the ballot box. Meanwhile, Democrats in general want to expand access to the ballot box. And this is something that President Biden and Democrats in the Senate and in the House of Representatives wants to push. And they have said that they're going to do this with or without Republican help.
Thank you very much, Patsy. It's good to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. I was talking to White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara.